I was on the floor for about 5 hours yesterday, just meeting random people from the community. And the number one question that I got was, what is it like to be retired? And I'm 42 years old, and I realized that you don't actually retire. You just get more time to work for yourself. That could be cutting the grass, that could be washing the dishes, that can be home improvement projects. And one of those meetings we had over dinner, there are a lot of people that are just starting their career and realize that they are already planning retirement in their early 20s. And I'm asking them, why are you rushing so fast? And for a lot of them, they were born into a tech culture that I was unfamiliar with when I started. When I started, it felt like playing the game Metroid. I was born in the 80s. Anyone ever had an NES, the 8-bit Nintendo system? I thought the graphics were so real in the 80s. And I remember playing this game Metroid for the first time. And when you bought a Nintendo game in the 80s, there's not much of an instruction manual. And the game Metroid, you just find yourself on this weird planet, and you go down into this world, and you're like, why am I here? Unlike the games that I was playing before, like Mario, where the objective was to save the princess. You kill everything else in your way until you get to the princess. Pretty easy objective, but Metroid isn't like that. Like developers, you don't read the documentation, so all the opening text, you just like start, and you find yourself in the middle of the game. You run to the left, and it's a dead end. And you run to the right, and you have no idea what you're doing, and you die pretty instantly. And most software developers start their careers the same way. You're just literally guessing. Imagine playing Metroid for the first time with the project manager next to you. How long is it going to take you to beat the game? You're like, I have no idea. I've never played this game before. And most of us, if you're like me, I've had a 25-year career. And like the game Metroid, when you go far enough and you realize that you're not any good at it, you get to reset the game. Or you lose enough and the game makes you start over. And a lot of us in our careers, we have gone from company to company, essentially playing the same game. And if you reset the game 5 or 6 times, and the next time someone watches you play it, you actually look like you know what you're doing. You know that you don't need to run to the left at the beginning of the game because it's literally a dead end. You can't go that way right now. You have to proceed to the right and make your way up the wall until you find the first thing that will allow you to go back to the left. You've done this enough times. But also, a lot of times, people think they're playing a single-player game, have no reason why. This idea that you need to go from junior engineer to senior engineer, principal engineer, distinguished engineer, as if it matters. There's a score thing in Metroid, but no one cares. The score doesn't matter at all. The whole point of the game is just to beat the game. And for those that are really good at it, there's an experience to be had in Metroid. There's things you don't actually have to do, but they're probably worth exploring because it's part of the game. I'm trying to make sure I don't have to leave. And the one thing I learned about the Metroid game, if you try to do this by yourself, most people say that they're self-taught, or they take a lot of pride in brute forcing solutions when they could just zoom out. And back in the 80s, there was this magazine, Nintendo Power. If you bought the magazine, sometimes they would have the full map of the game illustrated for you. And some people are like, that feels a little like cheating. I'd rather do it myself, right? There's a lot of platform engineers here that are like, I can roll my own Kubernetes. Who needs VMware? It's just VXT instructions and KVM. I can do that in a weekend. And a lot of people are walking around playing this game in single-player mode, failing to zoom out. And the truth is, there's a lot of shortcuts in the game if only you're willing to listen and learn from other people. And so when I meet people in their early 20s, all they see is most of us at the end of our careers. They watch how we play the game, but it looks like it's on easy mode. But the truth is, it doesn't work that way. Sometimes it's worth zooming out and seeing the big picture. And a lot of people know me from the Kubernetes community, and they ask me all of these Kubernetes questions. And they ask me, what do you think about Kubernetes today in 2023? I'm like, I have no feelings about Kubernetes in 2023 at all. I've been zooming out my whole career. Kubernetes is a very small, and even smaller than that piece of the puzzle for most people. And it's only once you played the Kubernetes game to its logical end that you can actually zoom out and reset and realize where it belongs in the entire landscape. And the last time I gave a keynote, someone said, Kelsey, I realized what happens when you've been doing this long enough. Anyone that does something long enough and they get good at it, you eventually become a philosopher. You start to understand the thing not for what it is, but why you do it. And you develop a philosophy around it. And so I have a lot of philosophies around technology in general, and hopefully through this fireside chat, we can dig deeper into the philosophy. I'm not the Kubernetes guy. I'm just a person that played the game a few times, and I have some opinions after zooming out for a while. So hopefully we get to dig into those details today. Thank you all for hanging out with us this morning.
Thank you, Kelsey, for joining us. I know personally you've been an inspiration to me and many, many, many people, so it's fantastic to have you. And you're always so generous with your time, and I think that's something that struck me really early on when I met you for the first time, which was during the pandemic online. I just reached out to you, and you were generous enough to offer me a call. We chatted for a while, and I think we had another call a few months later, and every time I messaged you, you've always responded and been really generous. And it was amazing to see yesterday you spent all day on the floor. I don't think you moved from your spot pretty much. And someone mentioned to me last night, actually, when we went out after the event, and he said he spent 4 hours chatting to you. And he said it seemed like 5 minutes. So yeah, certainly an inspiration to me and many people. So thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So yeah, the format for this is we're going to ask Kelsey a few kickoff questions and things. But we've got a Slido we're going to throw up on the screen now, actually, which is going to allow the audience to ask some questions online. So if you scan the QR code, in the second half of this session, we'll move to the audience questions. I think you can upvote these, so the best questions, hopefully you'll work them out between you. You can upvote those, and then we'll fire some of those across to Kelsey. But actually, we'll leave that up there just for a few minutes. Not a few minutes, a few seconds.
I really liked your kind of opening statement, Kelsey, about it's a game that we're all playing. And it really resonated talking to junior engineers with me about how they see yourself or myself that are at that end of that game. And we've played it, and especially during incident response, I think I heard a PagerDuty out there, so hopefully someone didn't run off. But it's a chill through you when you hear that. But I find it really interesting talking to juniors that want to skip to the end. What's kind of your advice to them to enjoy the experience or to just listen as much as possible?
I wish I could give them the big picture. I wish I could actually hold up a mirror and convince them to like what they see. All the other advice is superficial, probably can't be repeated. It's just my lived experience. And I learned to do a better job with mentoring those people because they're unique in their own way, but they just don't understand it yet. And nor have they been given the leeway to figure it out. Your whole life, you're kind of being told what to do. You go to school, you get the grades. Maybe someone convinces you to go to college and take a loan. And then you figure out how to go from junior engineer to senior engineer in 2 years because all your friends did it. And it makes zero sense. And I think for a lot of them, it's just like, experience the thing that's in front of you. Some people complain about having to write PHP at work. Learn everything about PHP, all the way down to the runtime, to the bytecode, its interface to the kernel. And I promise that if you learn those things, you can apply them to the next thing. And so I think I would tell them just to slow down and be patient and gather that experience that they watch us all have.
I think, yeah, I find people are always jumping careers as well. So, you were with a company for 2 years, and then you're immediately looking for the next one. And
I jumped all my career. I don't know what the best advice is. Every 3 months, I left for more money. This is business. If I can double my salary by jumping, I am out of here. There is no loyalty. If you were loyal, then you would pay me enough money where jumping would make no sense. I think it's okay to jump, but don't jump before you actually accomplish something. What's the point of resetting the game if you didn't make it far enough to learn what to do the next time you play? And so I think it's not necessarily this time boundary, but there are some companies where you only need to be there 6 months. There's only 6 months of learning available at that particular company. How many times can you install Ubuntu using a CD inside of a data center? There is no reason to be doing that 10 years from now if your goal is to progress. And so if that's all you're gonna get out of 6 months and you meet the senior engineer and you say, hey, how long have you been here? And they say 5 years. And you're still installing Ubuntu from a CD-ROM. And if that's not the trajectory for you, there is nothing wrong with leaving in 6 months. Just make sure it's clear what the hell you want to do on the next go round. And so I think the jumping around, but just jump around with the purpose and the strategy. In my last couple of years at Google, I jumped around a lot between projects. And there was always something to carry between those projects, but my ultimate goal was to ship something that people would actually be willing to pay for, and then move on to the next thing, so I can become this well-rounded, very experienced engineer. So I know a lot of people get slack for this idea that you should stay at a company for 5 years before jumping. That's just not how the game works anymore. And most companies, to be honest, aren't that exciting that are worth 5 years of your time.
And I guess your career's been pretty varied as well. I mean, you started out, you mentioned about being on the help desk yesterday, and I believe, is it working at Bell South? Was it the?
It's all the same. And most people start at tech support, you answer a call, and someone's like, my web server is down. I'm paying your company money to give me web hosting for $99 a month. That comes with my SQL plus email, 250,000 domains, and my server's down. And you get 8 minutes tops to bring it back up. And then you realize that even as a distinguished engineer, my last title at Google, you're still in the customer service business. GKE doesn't work as I think it should. Someone should fix it. The fixes are more elaborate, the fixes are bigger, but I think if anyone understands the technology piece, these are just tools for actual humans. And the closer you get to that feedback loop, you will feel like you're in tech support.
Yeah, definitely. I always try and instill into my engineers that our customers are not even the people we're supporting. It's our customers' customers, or our customers' customers' customers, and trying to empathize with that end user that's sitting there unable to do something.
Your customers, whoever you made a promise to. And so if you're in ops and your customer's the developer across and they rely on you to keep the infrastructure up, it's okay if that's actually your customer, and have empathy for them. If you skip over them too fast and say, well, I'm supporting your indirect customer, but that's the feedback loop that's in front of you. And so I think a lot of times for a lot of people, they skip this part. The human side is more important by far.
And you had a stint as well running your own business, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of people, when I started out in the US, you look at the job posting, they want 10,000 years of Java experience. They want 40,000 years of mainframe experience. And I'm like 19, working fast food prior. I didn't go to college. And so you look at those job postings and you're intimidated, at least I was, not to even try. The easiest thing to do was to start in, this is 99, 2000. And I lived in a small town right outside of Atlanta, and there was no local computer store. And there were not a lot of technicians that could service like a small insurance company that was using Windows, trying to figure out how to do remote desktop so it can buy Microsoft Office only once and have someone log in from another machine so they can use it. And so as a technician, you realize that you can learn those particular skills. And in that particular moment, I remember going to one of those companies and they're saying, hey, we have this networked Xerox printer. And you look at it and it's like, hey, can you hook it up to the network? And you've never done it before, so you do the obvious thing. He's like, yeah. And I was at that company from 6 p.m. when they closed to 6 a.m. when they came back in. They're like, you're still here? I was like, oh no, I just came in to check on everything to make sure it was working. And at that time, there was no easy access to the internet where you could find some Stack Overflow thing. You literally just trying various things. What is NetBUI? Maybe that's what I should use. Connect this thing to a network. And you learn to figure it out. So to me, that early couple of years of like running your own business, the answer is always yes. And you just have to figure it out. And that just carries on to the other parts of your career. And so after that, I think going into corporate America, at least for me, I realized most people had never gone through that you just figure it out. Yeah. There was a lot of, that's not my title. No one gave me training for that. And honestly, if you're paying attention and you're early into your career, this is your probably number one advantage. If my colleague has that mindset, this is going to be easy. You're not necessarily competing, but there are limited spots to rise to the top. And it's easy competing with people with that mindset and attitude. And it took me a long time to learn that I can't change that mindset. At best, you can be an example of the opposite. And to me, my career was kind of built off of just this observation of, these are not the helpers. There are a lot of people that just want tasks. Give me my Jira tickets, and I promise to do them, and nothing more. And that's okay. But I think there's an alternative where you say, I think I can just figure it out.
And you've worked at startups, large corporates, run your own business. I guess there's lessons learned across all those things. I mean, how do you find startup culture versus big corporate culture?
I mean, back then, startup culture was that mentality. You figure it out because you only have 6 months of runway. You're gonna run out of money, and then the company is over. So the meetings are different. In corporate, you can say, we can do this in Q3 of 2024, because you probably would just be around then. In startups, that makes no sense. We will do this next year in Q3. We won't have money next year in Q3. And the conversations are different. The conversations are about what can we do now with what we know and the people we have. And the mindset is just incredibly different. And one of my best experiences was probably at CoreOS, right? There was all of this opportunity. Containers were just coming out, and there were all of these gaps. And you get to move as fast as you're willing to believe that you can. You identify a problem, and you execute. But to my surprise, and I advise a lot of startups try to mimic themselves after large corporations. Why are you doing Scrum with 3 people? Quarterly planning with 3 people. What are you planning? With 3 people, you should have such a high resolution of shared context that you can move much faster than people who don't. Yet, we see a lot of startups behave like large enterprises and adopt all the things that make a large enterprise slow.
Yeah.
And so that's unfortunate, but I thought the purpose of a startup or even a small team was to be able to have context so tight that they could actually execute on things, because consensus is faster to arrive to.
And you mentioned about becoming a philosopher more as you progress. Was that more organic, or was there a tipping point in your life where maybe you were early stage of your career, we're just making mistakes and just running with things, and then there was a point in your life where you went, actually, I can slow the pace down, I can think more about things, I can be more strategic. Was there a tipping point, or was that more organic?
I was working at Puppet Labs, and I was new. I'm in the get it done mindset. And I started contributing to open source before I took the job there. I was working in financial services, and I'm contributing on nights and weekends. And then eventually I get a job there. And my mindset was, if it's broke, you just fix it. And at that time, this is 2015-ish maybe, 2014, Puppet had no module tool at all. You just go find code on the internet and you put it in a random directory and you hope for the best. And so there was this prototype of, how do we build something in that felt like Ruby gems, where there was a package manager, version control, the whole 9. And they had tried it a few times and said, this isn't worth doing. And so I got this project and I made it work. And I flew from Atlanta to Portland, Oregon, the headquarters of Puppet Labs. And I remember Engineering Friday, I'm like, oh, wait till they see what I've done. It's gonna be amazing. Because I felt really excited when I got out to work, and I felt that they would be able to capture the same energy once they saw it. And I gave this live demo, and I remember one of the lead engineers was like, this will never work. Why are we even doing this? I thought we agreed that we would stop trying. And I'm sitting there like, what the hell is this? I thought we made progress. I thought we were gonna all just like build a team around it and polish it up for production. And it didn't go that way. And one of our UX leads, he walked up and he said, F that. That was effing amazing, and don't be afraid of your own power. And I kind of realized that the team lead may have not been fit to lead. He was only the lead by title. And he was unable to inspire that next generation of developers that came to Puppet Labs to push things forward because he couldn't do it. So there's no way that he could see someone else doing what he couldn't. He lacked the vision, or he was narrow. And so when I realized that, I was like, oh, leadership is very different than the title situation. And so I learned how to just inspire the people who were ready. So you take the same prototype and you start recruiting the people who believed. Hey, you want to work on this? You want to work on this? And eventually 2 people agree. And we ship, and the thing is still there, Puppet Forge. Built a whole website, a whole module thing. There's dependency management, version control, the whole 9. And to me, I was like, look, if I can actually see it, and if I'm actually willing to do it and inspire other people to join in, that's leadership. And so my philosophy became, it doesn't matter. I stopped debating Jenkins versus, it literally doesn't matter. You can pick one, Go down as far as you can go, and if it doesn't work, you can zoom out and pivot to the other thing. So I stopped arguing on the whiteboards. I stopped this allegiance to technology. I went to KubeCon last year, and someone had a Kubernetes tattoo. I'm like, what if they changed the logo? No, that's, to me, philosophy-wise, these are just ideas that are implemented with small checkpoints in time. The next thing will come. And if it doesn't come, we should be disappointed because that means there's no progress. At some point, Kubernetes will be replaced. And if it doesn't get replaced, then that is a dark period. That means no progress has been made. And so I kind of learned to just zoom out and just think about the fundamentals, and those details don't matter. So that's what I mean by the philosophy, and then it just makes it easier, what's the name of this conference, to navigate when you're not stuck on something.
Yeah. Is there, I mean, you've had so many open source projects and the opportunity to work on so many different things. Where do you look back the most fondly? What brings the biggest smile to your face when you think back?
There's this open source, I had just left Puppet Labs, configuration management. And the holy grail of configuration management, 2013, you would realize is file package service. Those three resources, if you've done it correctly, feels like all you ever needed. If you were using a Red Hat system, you have a couple of choices. One, you can write a bunch of bash script to install random artifacts all over the file system, or you can make an RPM. If you made an RPM, then life got really easy in the way to think about an application. It's just a package, even the one you've written in-house. You can put the JVM, JBoss, and your app in one big blob and just use the Yum package manager, and off you go. So that's your package. And then service start, or whatever init system you're using. And then there's always config. So if you get those three things right, most people, their config management setups look really good because they represented that they made all the hard choices to normalize everything else before using config management. So the next company I went to, I'm like, we're not wasting time with config management. I've seen its limitations, because right before, Docker had came out. And I remember you couldn't say containers at Puppet Labs. People were like, that's a fad. People would be writing configuration code to the end of time. And I realized at that point, Puppet had went from disruptor to being disrupted, and didn't know what to do with it. They couldn't reconcile a world where config management in that form would not be needed. Terraform was also on the horizon, and the concept of a node being the end-all be-all was also being challenged. So I go to this new company, we introduced Golang to replace some of the microservices, and they're like, what are we gonna do for config management? I was like, you know what, we just need file package service. And I built this tool called conf-d. And I open sourced it, we used it in production, and I open sourced it. And I remember going to FOSDEM for the first time. That's like one of the purest open source conferences in the world. And I'm in Europe at FOSDEM, and I'm in this room watching people give talks. And one of the talks was on conf-d. And I'm sitting in the back, and I'm watching someone educate people on the thing I created. I never met this person, and this person gave this amazing overview around conf-d and its philosophy. And I'm sitting back there as this proud father, like I made a thing. But the thing I made was an idea.
Yeah.
And that idea had traveled around the world without me being there. And I was like, wow, this is an amazing thing. But if you've ever been an open source maintainer, there's this other thing that happens. While that part is amazing, there's this other part that brings reality to you. You wake up and it's Saturday, and large company that did earnings reports, like they made $10 billion in profit. And you see the email address show up on GitHub. Hey, I work at a large company that makes tons of cash, and we would like you to work for free. See, we're using your project in production, making God knows how much money with it. And we would like you to volunteer to fix our most pressing issue. And I'm reading this thing like, no, for what? This makes no sense. Is this what I'm doing? Is this what the open source community believes is appropriate? And I decided that that wasn't going to scale. You start to get this burnout and this fatigue because it literally it's not sustainable. But the other proud moment of that project was when I started to say no. New features were coming in. HashiCorp released Vault, and they wanted me to integrate Vault the same way I integrated console? And I said, no. This is getting a little bit of a distraction for the project. File, package, service. You only need key values in one backend, not all of the backends. So I decided to say no. And I remember they came out with console template. And it was on Hacker News, console template. I'm like, damn, that's the spot Conf D used to occupy. It's been replaced, or it's been challenged. And I remember someone on Hacker News made this comment, this is a ripoff of Kelsey's project, Conf D. Why not just contribute there? This is not in the spirit of open source. And I remember, and the comment is still up, hey, Kelsey here, maintainer of Conf D. This is what's supposed to happen. I said no, and they took an idea that I created and continued on and added the missing feature. This is what open source is to me. And so it reminded me that that can still happen. And that's part of the puzzle. So that project gave me the end-to-end experience, the good, the bad, and the reality.
You've mentioned a couple of projects that have been in the news recently, HashiCorp and Terraform, and obviously the license changes that, I understand from a business point of view why they've done it, but I know the open source community has had feelings about it. What's your take, if you're willing to talk about it at all?
I mean, I think back to that Conf D project, that person on the weekend working by themselves, being asked to do things when other people also have the resources to contribute at a much higher level than I was able to do as a solo maintainer. HashiCorp isn't a solo maintainer, but there are real people who work on those tools. And if you ever worked at a big company, there's this weird illusion people have that Google somehow has 10,000 people working on all these open source projects, and there's this mastermind plan to hold this open source project hostage. It doesn't work that way. Typically, as an employee of a large company working on open source, you are actually trying your best and putting your career on the line to work on open source. For a lot of people, it's a career limiting move. You're literally working on the thing that makes the company no money. You're working on the thing that costs the company money. You're working on the thing that is one of the biggest liabilities to the company. And so anyone that invests their time doing that, there's a real challenge that goes unseen. And so when a company like HashiCorp makes that decision, you got to ask yourself, what were the maintainers' thoughts on that? Pretty sure there was a big business decision there, but I'm pretty sure there was this emotional thing of, why are we doing all of this work for people who are unconcerned whether I survive or not? That is a real thing that I think a lot of people are oblivious to. So there's that component. So I have empathy because I've been a maintainer and I knew that sometimes you got to say no and you got to make different decisions. But there's another side of this coin where there are some people who've expressed ill intent towards their own open source community, and that's also a problem. As someone who's contributed to Terraform in the past, you can't treat it that way. And they also have to have empathy for the contributors that came along and made the project better. But I think there was this illusion that it was our project. It was never our project. It was HashiCorp's project. And you were just there dropping code off. It was never yours. And for many people, they reassigned it to them.
Yeah.
And this is the strategic part where people have to zoom out. Now, the open source project or the open source community has to come to this realization that it's not the project that matters, it's the maintenance. So it's been forked. We'll find out in 5 to 10 years if they are serious or not. Everybody excited about the initial fork. Some of y'all are gonna go get the stickers and the t-shirt. You'll be at KubeCon walking around with all the branded merchandise. And maybe in 2 years, no one wants to contribute anymore. When that FedRAMP requirement comes in and no one has any experience in that arena, you're gonna probably turn back to the company that has the biggest motivation to make that happen and decide, do you really wanna be an open source maintainer? So to me, the jury is still out. Fork is only the start.
Yeah.
And we'll find out really quickly if the community really believes in this open source idea, because it's not the fork, it's the maintenance. And most people want nothing to do with maintenance, not over a long period of time. So I think this is a really good lesson that people will learn, the same one that I learned from Conf D, about the challenge of maintaining open source for a long period of time.
Well, great. Well, I think we're about time now where we should move to some of the audience questions, and we've got some good ones I see. Maybe you kind of touched on some of this stuff, but the first one is about the biggest mistake that you made as a software engineer, but is there a single biggest mistake that you can pick out in your mind, or something that you can share with people, and what your lessons learned were from that?
To me, all the mistakes were worth it, but the biggest mistake, thinking that software was the most important part of the puzzle. When you're a software developer, you think you're on God mode. Sometimes, if you're being honest, you're like, I could build that. Have you seen my IDE plugins? I'm unstoppable. And I remember trying to convince a group of engineers that they are the last mile of this equation. They're like, dude, nothing happens without the code. I was like, okay. And we did this really cool thought experiment. I said, all right, you guys ready? And I said, build it. And they're like, build what? I was like, aha! There's so much context that goes into it. I used to be all about Python. Everything about it. I was like, it's the best language in the world. I didn't consider the tattoo. But I definitely had tunnel vision. And if you're anything like me, you get to the world where you're like, if it's not written in Python, I can't touch it. Is that Java? Ooh, I'm allergic. It's not for me. Everything needs to be written in Python. And as a developer, and lots of us have been guilty of this, you see a framework that will let you solve this problem in an hour. You're like, oh man, it's written in Golang. The first thing we gotta do is rewrite it in Python. It's like, what the hell is that? That's literally a waste of time. So to me, that was like the biggest mistake that I made, is that Python is just one dialect for talking to the machine. And some people in life can speak multiple real human languages. And that means that they can be optimized for whatever local environment they're in. If you travel this world, you can get pretty far with English. But there's some places you go where English is not the primary thing. And you will be a fish out of water if that's the only language you know. And there's a lot of value from learning the language, because it's not just the language. You learn the culture, you learn the customs, you can watch the movies, you can participate in the larger ecosystem if you're only willing to learn the language. So when I meet developers and they say, I am a Java developer, and I'm like, you are limited. You're a developer. And ideally, you learn as many dialects that let you actually dive deep into the ecosystems in which you want to participate. And someone asked me on Twitter, what language should I learn first? I'm thinking of Python versus Golang. And I learned to listen. And you say, hey, what do you do? And they said, I work on Terraform, Docker. And I said, the answer became super clear. If I were you, given that context, I would learn Go, because that's what your tools are written in. And if you learn Go, then you can go from just a consumer of Terraform and Docker to a contributor, or someone that can actually fix and extend them. So that was probably the biggest mistakes I made as a software engineer, limiting myself too early in that process.
You've touched on something that around learning, and you mentioned about philosophy. What have you learned about how you learn and how you pick up a new language really, really quickly, or what your first steps on entering a new project?
This stuff is pretty much all the same. When Envoy came out, people were like, oh my God, cloud native networking, something, something. I'm sitting here, why are you adding all of these words? It's just networking. Have you not used Nginx before? And they were like, nah, Kelsey, you gotta see Envoy. I said, all right. Let me guess what it does. They're like, you're not gonna guess what it is. I said, all right. It has a config file. They're like, yeah. It takes HTTP traffic. Yeah. You can process things like headers and send it to some other backends. Like, you used Envoy before? I'm like, it's the same thing, man. That's how it works. That's all it can be, because you learn the fundamentals. So to me, it's like, if I see a new technology that I've used for the first time, I ask myself, what's the fundamentals? What is this thing doing? And then what were people doing before this thing? Those are the two questions I ask. What is it doing? And what were people doing before? And once you get those answers, you can kind of see through any of the hype cycles. Easy, right? It's just like, oh, I see what you're doing. I understand the fundamentals. And then I can judge the quality of the project based on the implementation of fundamentals. I've yet to see projects implement brand new fundamentals no one's ever seen before, because that's really, really hard. To teach people a concept they've never seen, forget if the tool works or not. You have to spend years getting people on board with the new mental model. So to me, that's the thing that just speeds things up. I was patient in the early days. That means I can go fast now.
And there's a question there about hype again, that there's a lot of projects out there, and how do you tune out of that hype and focus in on the projects that really matter? And
How many people like hype? Raise your hand. So all the hands that are down are literally lying. Because the only reason why we make what we make in this game is because of the hype cycles. If there was no hype in this industry, you will be paid less than any other profession, I promise you. When was the last hype cycle for sanitation? Man, those new trash trucks are gonna be crazy. No hype cycle. No hype cycle, no attention. No attention, no money. So these hype cycles are the only thing that prop up your inflated salaries depending on where you live. And then you gotta ask yourself, what do you wanna do on the hype cycle? You can pretend to be the magician that knows something no one else knows, and you try to trick people into promising this technology does something that you know good and well it doesn't. Or you can be the educator that looks below the hype and you're honest with people. Hey, I know people are really excited about this right now, but let's bring it back to reality. Here are the fundamentals. Here's why we're excited. Here's the promise people wish we would have, and just here's where we're at, right? So WASM is out. People are like, oh my God, WASM is going to change computing as we know it. You're like, oh, really? Where does it run? Oh, it runs on computers. Which ones? The ones we already have. Oh, okay. What kind of apps can we write? The ones we write today. Oh, okay. Or is going to be a new app we can never write before? No, same apps, same network, same internet, same protocols. And so if you're in the hype cycle, you walk around saying, this is the next big thing in computing. But if you're the educator, you're saying, here's the problem we're trying to solve. It's hard to secure unbounded applications on the Linux syscall interface. It's humongous. And maybe something that's even more complex is CPU instruction sets. These two things combined lead to some amazing bugs that are hard to predict. And there's been other ecosystems like the browser and the mobile device that have really constrained programming environments that tend to focus on being secure by default and limiting the surface to only what the app needs. And so we can take WASM from one context, and we're thinking, and we don't know yet, that we can put it in another. And maybe, just maybe, we can get the sandbox, because we've been doing this for a long time. We've been playing the game for a long time. And WASM is just another reset, playing the exact same game. And the idea is that maybe this technology that worked in a different context will give us a missing piece from the one we have. But that's how I deal with the hype cycles. And it's just much easier that way, because you don't have to overpromise. And then it's easier, I think, to onboard people because they're like, oh, same app, different target. Oh, this is simple. And then you deflate the hype cycle. And then we get to the real part, which is actually using the thing.
And talking of hype cycles, AI and machine learning, any views on that? Hype cycle, or here to stay?
I was so happy.
Replaces engineers?
I was so
engineers
happy.
are going to be gone?
I was so happy when AI ML came out, because that's when I decided to retire. I was like, oh, they're resetting the game again. I don't want to play. It's the same game. But the nice thing about looking at this reset after playing the game so many times, and I've actually been a moderator in some panels where people who are distinguished engineers in the AI ML field, I'm surprised that they're still unable to explain it. That's still surprising to me. Or maybe some people are choosing to be the magician in this hype cycle. And one thing I realized, I was in the panel a couple weeks ago, being the moderator, and I said, listen, when I hear about LLMs, like this is one of the things that I think a lot of humans have had their first intentional interaction with this thing called machine learning or AI. Even though it's been in your Google Maps forever, it's been in your spam filters forever, you've been using this stuff for a decade, and no one's had this level of attention to it. But there's something interesting about the chat interface. For a long time, if you think about being a normal human, you are born into the most sophisticated computer we've ever seen in this world. And it doesn't take a lot of power either. You can eat a little bit and compute lots of things. You can interpret the world on the fly from the mental models that you built up over time. And our interface to work with each other is natural language. Hey, Mark, what time is the event tomorrow? That's all I have to say. And we have the shared context of the world, and we know what to do and be in the same place at the same time. Computers are not quite there yet at all. And so people are at the point now, I think, when I look at ML and AI, and people are so excited about this chat interface, and I'm asking, what are people excited about? And I think the excitement comes from the point that the way we human computers interact with each other, we're finally getting this primitive thing, the computer, to rise to the same level of interaction that we all participate in every day. So there's this hope that one day, the dumb computer can participate in the most powerful programming language we've ever created. Natural language that we use to talk to each other, to get people to do things, the computer isn't really good at. And so people are really inspired that maybe one day this thing will rise to that same level that we are already at. And so for me, I think when I saw ML and all the excitement behind it, it helped me kind of appreciate what I already have. My mental model is strong. The capabilities I have are strong. And some people are really excited about the computer telling them everything to do. Autopilot telling you what code to write, asking this thing for vacation plans. Maybe that's the life you want to live. But for me, I think I want to be on the other side of the equation. I want to be the person producing the data set. I want to be the person living in the real world, doing things that you want to train on. And I think that's how human history has always gone. Some people go out and try things, and other people watch them and say, wow, look what they did. And they learn from that. And then you inspire them to do things. So for me, I want to be on that side of the equation. So look, it's great technology. I'm not here to underplay it. But don't underplay yourself by putting yourself in this bottom of the hierarchy because you think the computer can replace you.
I guess we're slowly getting to time. I mean, what is your next adventure? What's the next 5 years for Kelsey looking like? Gardening?
Don't die. Right, that's the game. Whatever problem that presents itself, there's no rush. There's no OKRs. Doesn't matter. And so for me, I get to play the game nice and slow. Whatever problem presents itself, I now have this thing called time. There's no rush. I don't have to give any estimates. I don't need to figure out what to do by Q3 2024. It doesn't matter. And so I get to play the game in slow mode. And in slow mode, that means you get more time to react. I can choose to do nothing, and it will be okay. And so for me, I think the next 5 years are just appreciating that moment. So there's probably a lot to unlearn about the pace of things. And I don't have to move so fast. And so I think for me, the next 5 years is literally figuring out what to do with my time, right? Lots of people have given me advice, when they pay you, they give you advice about what you should be working on. But now I get to be that person. And so really right now for the next 5 years, I'll learn things and spend more time with the problems that are in front of me. And there's no rush.
Amazing.
We've got a few minutes left. I'm always fascinated by, I love your storytelling and the way you convey things, the analogies you come up with, I think sometimes are amazing, simplify things for people. Was that a skill learned, or was that something that evolved more organically?
In tech and corporate America, it's a skill unlearned. When you get to corporate America, you cannot be yourself. You need to be the job description. You are a Linux system administrator level 2. That's it. In this box, you sit over there. And you need to interact with everybody the way a machine interacts with people. So do not learn to tell stories as you were raised. Because your whole life was raised via story and watching people do things in the real world. That's how you were born. You were born that way. That's normal. That's the natural part. The unnatural part is talking to people with PowerPoints. Hey, I really want to tell you something, but I'm not done with the slides. That's not natural. Who does that? Do you walk around real people in your real life giving them presentations? You don't do that. You just talk to them.
Yeah.
You tell them stories. I went to the doctor today, and you wouldn't believe what they told me. And they sit there, anticipating every move. And you're very patient, and you tell them, and you reveal the ending. And it's like, wow. I hope I never have to go to the doctor for that. So that's natural. That's what we already know how to do. So for me, it was unlearning the corporate bubble thing and saying, I don't want to do it that way. I don't actually like it. And I get it. We work in a lot of jobs where you don't have permission to do that. If you go to your company's Keynote and you speak in natural terms, the marketing team might freak out. Whoa, whoa, whoa. That's not what we scripted ahead of time. We didn't agree that you could say that. And so I think that's the part where you have to unlearn it. And the thing is, in this business, this tech business we're in, I don't know why we forgot, but these developers, they're actually people that build things. And most developers are tired of the BS, to be honest with you. Most developers, when you say digital transformation, productivity, they're all like, this is straight nonsense. No one believes it. Like, people that actually do the work don't believe it. They know what productivity looks like. They work on it every single day so they can see through it. And I think the era that we live in currently, they're looking for the storytellers. And the best storytellers are just the ones that talk about real life. It doesn't have to be amazing. It doesn't need to be aligned with the hype cycle. It just needs to be honest. And so I think when you go back to the natural thing that you're already born to do, and you talk to people that way, it resonates more. Most people do not remember the corporate approved thing. They remember the human thing. And so when you get a chance to speak about the thing you're working on, the thing you're selling, it's easier to convey, in my opinion, via story, because it aligns with reality. And so that's where I went back to the storytelling component. Number one, because I found it easier and more natural. And then you look into the audience and watch how people respond to the story. There's a connection there. And so for me now, it's like you can try to focus on being right and presenting facts to people, or you can focus on how you want them to feel. And so when I go into even the executive meetings, and you're meeting a customer for the first time, you've done these executive briefings, you've done these executive roundtables, and sometimes you go into that meeting and you say, what is it going to take to close the deal? What number are we talking about? These are the things that are in your executive briefing. And I remember I started to scrap that stuff and said, how do I want them to feel when I leave? And you go in there and they're saying, we have all of these problems, and I'm just listening for the emotional thing that they care about. And then when I leave, I just need them to feel like this thing is possible. We can do this, probably with a little help. And so that's where the storytelling comes from.
That's great advice. So we're just about out of time, and I mean, I could listen to you for hours. I'm sure many of you could. And great storytelling and always great advice. And it's been a great pleasure to spend some time with you on stage. I mean, the work you've done in the community, I think, has been inspiring. I spoke to someone yesterday that they actually said they got into computing because of you as well. So I think the inspiration, I know you're retired now, but certainly you must be very proud of the work that you've done in the community and what you've done for everyone to inspire them. So thank you very much for your time. And yeah, if we can have a huge round of applause for Kelsey.